Life is full of surprises. The kind of surprises that can either make your day or turn it into a nightmare. In my case, life has always been an endless chain of nightmares, one after the other, culminating in a horrifying reality. I worked at Arby's, yes, the fast food chain, for years, trying to escape the never-ending spiral that my life had become. My mother had worked in Arby's too, ever since I could remember. It broke my heart to see her labor endlessly within its four walls. Oh, how I dreaded the thought of being trapped in the same loop, the same fate. But alas, here I am, years later, a mere image of my mother, working at Arby's and sharing a house with her. Life was hard, but what happened next was a shock that turned my world upside down. A cold wind blew our way when Arby's corporate decided to move my mother to Louisiana, all the way from Houston. It was a real head-scratcher. Their excuse was a staffing crisis at a location that could, kindly put, be termed as a disaster. The silver lining they offered was a lucrative paycheck and a month-long commitment. Despite my pleas, my mother had set her heart on it, but I couldn't let her go through this ordeal alone. So, we left my younger brother at home to look after the younger ones as we embarked on this grueling journey. The drive was exhausting, the place was horrendous, and the work was excruciatingly tiring. In the middle of nowhere, the Arby's was the only eating joint in a 10-mile radius, attracting an eccentric crowd where human decency was a far-fetched dream. Imagine serving a constant stream of unruly and volatile customers daily, all under the dire conditions of a restaurant that should have been condemned. The restaurant's freezer was a hazard, colder than an Arctic winter, breaking human tolerance thresholds. With a malfunctioning door, it was nothing short of a death trap. But, of course, the owners turned a blind eye, ignoring all cries for repair. Soon after, the dreaded month-long commitment became a nightmare when we were coerced into extending our stay. I worked like a dog, day in and day out, becoming a lifeless shell of myself. One evening, my mother, out of motherly concern, switched roles with me. Little did I know that this swap would morph into a horrifying ordeal. Waves of sleep deprivation hit me as I worked the cash register, the clanging noises in the backdrop acting as an unwanted soundtrack to my life. When the final hour of my shift approached, a deafening silence hung in the air. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was alone in the dreadful place with my mother missing. A chilling thought crossed my mind as I rushed towards the freezer, and there she was, trapped in the unbearably cold freezer, frozen, gone forever. The guilt of being unable to save her in time haunts me even today. While I've moved back to Houston, the echo of her ordeal follows me at Arby's. I am fighting a lawsuit against Arby's corporate, seeking justice for their negligence, hoping this could help others, help them avoid the nightmare that consumed my mother. This story is inspired by the real-life tragedy at Louisiana Arby's on May 11th. Nguyen Lee and his mother, Nguyen Lee, found themselves in the same predicament. They were regular employees at Arby's in Houston, but were relocated to Louisiana at the company's request. In a heartbreaking turn of events, Nguyen Lee lost her life, trapped behind the malfunctioning freezer door. The Lee family is now fighting a lawsuit against Arby's. They deserve justice, and so does every other employee risking their life in similar conditions. Here's my story as a 24-year-old woman about the shadows that followed me from my first job at Wendy's, which I landed when I was on the brink of turning 18. This particular Wendy's joint was a rather isolated, infamous corner of town, notorious for its crime stories. It was neighbored by a motel, offering refuge to homeless folks, some of whom were known to nurse drug habits. As a high schooler, my schedule accommodated me working the evening shift. My day would start around late afternoon and often extend up to the wee hours of the morning, a routine I quite enjoyed, being a night bird myself. I recall my second week at the job behind the counter, when a man, probably well into his 40s, began to take an unusual interest in me. He referred to himself as Suicide. He became a frequent customer, usually asking for nothing but a cup of water and then using the opportunity to make remarks about my appearance. These comments weren't new to me, but they had always come from my peers. It was unsettling to be on the receiving end of such attention from a man old enough to be my father. I feel the need to mention here that, as a child, I was subject to assault by an older family member. So this unwelcome attention stirred up old wounds and sent me seeking comfort behind my coworkers, who seemed to not take my fears seriously. As the weeks rolled on, this man's comments escalated in their boundary-crossing nature, much to the amusement of my coworkers, who chalked it up as an innocent crush. The situation, however, took a disturbing turn when one evening, Suicide made his usual water request. Instead of leaving, he clamped onto my wrist and inquired about my shift end. I refused to disclose details, yet he looped in the lobby for 3 hours, his gaze stalking me as I shuffled around doing my chores. I decided to speak with my manager, hoping he would be kicked out if he was still there on my return. To my relief, he'd left by the time I was done with my chores and was ready to clock out. Eased by this, I made the mistake of letting down my guard and decided to sit in the lobby to have my dinner. Midway through my meal, I noticed Suicide had returned and was making his way to join me at my table. I hurriedly finished my meal, making mindless small talk, having a brave face while wanting to bolt out at any second. As I was about to dig into my Frosty, by turning my spoon upside down and pulling it out of my mouth, he made a lewd comment that sent chills down my spine. I managed to brush past him and sprint to my car. To my horror, he gave chase. I just managed to lock my vehicle in time as he tried to open the door. I was able to drive off while he made a feeble attempt to block me. Sadly, my ordeal was far from over. I confided in my parents, who immediately had me file a police report. This came in handy as the cops nabbed Suicide for sexual misconduct. Upon my return to work, my coworkers were remorseful, finally understanding the seriousness of the situation. They, especially the male staff, ensured I was never left alone and was escorted to my car post-shift. Just when I thought the storm had passed, one day a group from the neighboring motel walked in, got water cups and positioned themselves in the lobby, watching me throughout my shift. It wasn't long before I overheard them discussing Suicide's arrest and making cryptic threats about snitches getting stitches. It was painfully clear that I was in their crosshairs, which triggered a panic attack in me. The fear persisted every time I saw someone lurking near my car, and I couldn't bear the constant, spiteful stares from Suicide's friends. This unending torment led me to relinquishing my job. Law enforcement was involved, but the haunting memories left an indelible mark on me. To this day, I can't bring myself to eat at that Wendy's, a place that used to be a source of pride for me as my first job, but was now reduced to a grim reminder of a past I wished to bury. Once upon a time at a Taco Bell, an unclean lady sauntered into our establishment. She made no effort to order anything, and her appearance and odor strongly suggested she was homeless. I noticed her as she glared my way, clutching her rear with an uneasy grip. Her face was a peculiar blend of bright red and undertones of purple. I could tell she was in a great deal of discomfort. With a determined stride, she directed herself to our restroom. Barely a few minutes later, unsettling screams echoed from the restroom. Screams chilling in their intensity, reminiscent of a horror movie with demonic possessions. We tried to brush it off, but as patrons quickly exited, we could no longer ignore the unfolding incident. Without any warning, we were ambushed by a vile, disgusting odor that felt like a physical assault on our senses, causing a mass exodus from our restaurant. We were left with an almost empty establishment when the screams finally ceased. Then we decided that the mystery of the distraught woman needed to be unveiled. My manager and I bravely ventured towards the restroom. However, we didn't make much headway before my manager keeled over, overwhelmed by the foul stench. What lay before me was nothing short of shocking. I found the woman sprawled on the floor, smeared with her own excrement. Handprints and streaks of diarrhea stained the walls. Her hands rested on her rear as if she had tried vainly to halt the unforgiving onslaught. Overcome with shock, I stepped away and called the police. It was too late for her. She was dead. Once upon a time, back in the good old year of 1995, I was a college lad in Brownwood, Texas. I took up employment as a shift closer at a local McDonald's when these global fast food joints still called it a night and closed their doors for a few hours. Our manager, distracted in his own world with the drive-thru girl, left us, the crew, to our own devices. Picture this: we'd get crafty and create miniature boats using nothing more than a hefty fry container, a regular straw, and a napkin we'd tape on as a sail. A live water bug, hapless yet vital to our amusement, was designated as the passenger for these fry container voyages. Our racing track? A place we had cheekily named the River Styx. In reality, it was nothing more than a sizzling chicken nugget fryer. As one might expect, the makeshift boats always met one of two fates. They'd burst into flames or slowly sink into oblivion. However, the passengers, our water bugs, always made a beeline for escape, jumping ship right into the scorching hot grease. Their end came swiftly, and they solidified, adopting an uncanny resemblance to chicken nuggets. We were always careful to fish out these crispy critters before wrapping up for the night, except when we failed to spot a deep-fried water bug. The next day, some unsuspecting kid ate his nugget Happy Meal and tasted the unanticipated water bug special. Cameras were promptly installed after this incident, all aimed directly at the nugget fryer. There's no smoke without fire, as the saying goes. And the smoky haze of this recent experience still hangs over me. This is my story, and is one that's bound to have you at the edge of your seats. My name's Nina, and I run the show as an assistant manager at a Burger King back in the UK. It all began on an evening shift when I was holding the fort with two of my subordinates, one of whom is a close buddy of mine. I'll refer to him as Will for this tale. Resting my feet after a busy day, I devoured a tasty bacon cheeseburger. I watched YouTube videos in the solitude of my office. Suddenly, there was a commotion. Will burst through the office door and informed me about a duo of disgruntled customers wanting to speak to me. They claimed that the crispy chicken and chicken royale they had ordered left them ill. At this news, my frustration knew no bounds. The week had been smooth sailing until now, and I didn't appreciate this interruption. Reluctantly, I left my comforting retreat and confronted the ladies. The woman launched into a tirade, accusing our food of making them sick and blaming it all on some bad batch of chicken. Interestingly, our chicken is pre-cooked, eliminating the possibility of food poisoning. Additionally, it takes longer than their claimed time to digest food. Their allegations, to put it mildly, were baseless. Feeling cornered, I resorted to the simplest means of escape. I obliged with a refund, hoping it would end the conflict. Little did I know, the storm was far from over. The calm before the storm, as it said, lasted a mere hour or so. The woman and her friend returned, this time with a band of friends. I could tell by their apparel, band shirts and tracksuit bottoms, that they were a notorious lot, possibly on some substances. This time, the accusations were on me. Unprofessionalism, incorrect refund transactions, and more. All of this is based on her experience working in a fast food restaurant. The audacity! At this point, I was at the end of my rope. I had been in the assistant manager's shoes for just over half a year, and this was my first encounter with such obstinate customers. With rising frustration, I interrupted her tirade. I apologized, clarified the refund situation, suggested she take it up with the restaurant manager if she remained dissatisfied, and then excused myself. Her parting shot was a loud, sarcastic critique of my management skills. What a night! With the chaos outside, I returned to the office sanctuary and dialed up my manager. Let's call him Ben. After narrating the ordeal, I heaved a sigh of relief on hearing that I had managed the situation well. Ben promised to review the CCTV footage and told me that if the woman returned, she would be banned, and the incident reported to the police. Now you might be thinking, surely that's the end of it. Oh, if only. Will informed me that the woman had requested my personal details, and her friends had taken photographs and made notes. This scared the daylights out of me. This chapter is not closed. Luckily, a manager from a different branch offered me a ride home that night. Living nearby, I usually walk, but this was a comforting gesture considering the circumstances. As I've warned you at the start, this incident is recent and has left me with lingering anxiety during each shift. Long story short, I'm seriously considering exploring other managerial roles. The thought of encountering such confrontations again does not appeal to me. But the question remains, what triggered this woman's outburst? Was it genuine dissatisfaction with the food, or was she simply looking for a confrontation? And what about her tragic end in our restroom? It is a mystery that still haunts me. All I can do now is hope that justice was served and that her troubled soul may finally rest in peace. So, that's a wrap. If you liked this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more creepy content. Thanks for watching.